just when you look at this particular draft, Kevin, and I know you have told us every year it's a unique situation, but is this draft even more wide open after you get past the first five than it has been in recent memory?
It seems to be, I think it's a lot of the same names, though. I think people are generally talking about the same names. It's just what order, and where they fit. So, it will be interesting, and that's what we spend a lot of time, just trying to model and different things like that. Our analytics department spends a great deal of time, poring over past lists and just projections and probabilities and stuff like that. So you kind of try to see it all unfold. I think the interesting thing is, different things like that is the information is year over year over year, you get more information and you're able to, kind of model your model and see where things go. And I guess that's the fun part of the anticipation. Certainly we'll have a long time to anticipate, less time than last year when we didn't have a first round pick. But, at 28, it'll be an interesting process.
Pretty much every year, the comment is made that we got the player, we had him drafted much higher. Yeah. Do you expect that you'll be able to keep that streak alive in 2025?
Yeah, I guess you hope so, but that's the thing. Like sometimes you're sitting at the table and you have to audibly gasp or hold your gasp in because someone takes a player that you may have in your second round or something and they take him in the first. So I think that's the art form of scouting. It's not the scientific form of it. There's no, I guess if there was a science, to it, then, everyone would be a lot more right than wrong. But, again, the art, the beauty is in the, the art of the scouts.
And finally, for me, I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but the last four teams to win the Stanley Cup have all used first-round picks or drafted players and then parlayed them into trades. Are you at that position now as a Cup contender to maybe consider that as a possibility?
We've been considering anything and everything, really. It comes down to again just what opportunities that are out there that you have the right currency for. Sometimes it's players, sometimes it's picks. Obviously, we've used lots of picks. I think there's probably a statistic out there that I think we're one of the bottom four teams to have picked in the draft in the last couple of years. So we've used lots of picks in other forms to try and keep pushing this team, and that's we'll continue to look at anything that is available to us to keep pushing it forward.
When you mention sort of poring over past lists analytically, my ears perk up, of course, right? So I wonder, what are some of the studies or things that you're able to do that maybe 10 years ago, tools you wouldn't have had in the toolkit?
Yeah, so, again, you take those 10 years or 8 years or whatever, and you see where you had a guy on the list where he was taken. You see where other, respected outside lists have them on the list where they're taken, and guys that are much smarter than me, put them into the computer and write the algorithms to kind of try and say, based on history, this guy here could be where we have him on our list and where other people have them on their list. We think this is a great probability that he's going to be there for you. Now, the funny thing is as soon as a player gets taken out of order, all those things change, so it's a dynamic type of situation. But, it adds a level that, like you say, you've gone from scouting where you used to have, boards on the wall where you'd write the names down to now doing things like this that just make it that much more detailed.
I think of Connor Hellebuck as the ultimate fifth round, right, and the career that he's had. And I think you've taken a lot of goalies kind of late rounds, replicating that at various levels of the organization. There's some talked about first round, second round this year. Now that you're part of me, word salad, I promise this to the guys. You've recently also mentioned that some of your stars are on the wrong side of 30. So are we going to see goaltending picks come further in the next few years towards the front?
I think goaltending is a very kind of niche position, certainly when it comes to the draft as well, because there is a lot of development and a lot of projection, and I think that's why you see it, and it's a hard development path because you only have basically two goalies. One goalie plays and the other one sits, and you constantly struggle as an organization when you have young goaltenders is how to develop them. And that's why you see a lot of goalies go through the the ECHL to start and continue to grow. So it's funny, we had a draft at the combine. We had an interview with a goaltender, and he said, where do you think you're going to go? And he says, well, I don't know, somewhere between, the fifth and the seventh round. And he said, well, you don't want to go in the first or the second round? Everyone seems to. He says, no. He says, draft a couple of good defensemen in front of me, so then draft me. So it was quite funny. So, it was an interesting comment.
One thing I also wanted to ask you today, it's not draft related, but with respect to some of the changes in the CBA coming up. I know that's not official. I recently went through all the no trade clauses in the league, and there's something like almost 20% of the National Hockey League compared to just a few in other leagues. Some leagues have like 2 no move clauses and other sorts of things like that. And for me, it's like we talk about taxes and all that sort of stuff. It's like, forget that. This is the one where the thumb is most strongly on the scale. Can you do anything to advocate as the Winnipeg Jets in those types of talks?
Well, again, I think it is a collective bargaining agreement, and I think that, the players that I guess get the opportunity to have no trades in their contracts, and we hand out some as well with guys on our own contracts. That they've earned that right, so something like that would have to be collectively bargained out. Everything comes at a cost, so whether whether it was discussed or is discussed is, above my pay grade when it comes to, what eventually, happens in a CBA. But, everything in there is negotiated. So whether we like it or don't like it, when it's in there, you read it and you just abide by it and you move on.
Kevin, you talked about gasping at tables. I guess you could probably do that a little more freely this year because you're not going to be surrounded by 31 other tables. Could you just give us a sense? It sounds like this is probably going to be a one and done. Are you happy with that? Would you prefer to be in person this year?
Yeah, I guess I won't give you the statistics of the vote that was taken, but it was probably, I think, along the lines of 2/3, 1/3. We were in the 1/3 to keep it the same way, and we would probably squarely vote that again. I think there's a uniqueness to, that being said, getting on a plane, coming back home, racing home for free agency, and that, well, that'll be a benefit, come Saturday night, not having to do that. But there's a uniqueness about it, and again, it'll be interesting to get some of the players' perspective. I guess they won't have anything to match it against, but I just think there's a uniqueness when the scouts put their their whole season on the line, and then you get to meet the kid and welcome him to the organization. So I guess we'll see how it goes. But there are, like anything, when you try something new, there's going to be pros and cons. I guess kudos to try something, and and then we'll evaluate it from there.
Obviously, at the draft, you see general managers wandering table to table. There's side discussions. Yeah. That's not going to happen. I mean, if it happens, it's all going to be virtual now, right? Texts and phone calls. Do you expect there'll still be plenty of communication?
Yeah, I think so. Again, we had kind of 2 rehearsals for this in the in the COVID drafts. Hopefully we've kind of learned a little bit there. The second day of that was very, very long. I think hopefully it does speed up. Last year's draft was different too. Being on the Sphere floor was much different than being on an arena floor. There's a certain thing that's burned into your mind where a team's table is when you're on a draft floor in an arena based on where the team finished, and that was not there. So, it was very tight on the floor last year. So I don't know that there was a lot of moving around. We obviously were trying to be very active to get into the first round. So there was lots of phone calls, lots of texts. Those kind of things are I imagine, will be prevalent here in this one. it does make it harder. In the first round, you can't call a timeout to make a trade, so you can call a timeout, but it's, you have to pick. Those are things that the nuances of maybe being on a floor make it easier, but we'll see how it goes.
And in that sense, how will you guys be set up tomorrow? Like, are you, in your basement? Or?
No, well, yeah. So normally we've set up in the dressing room, but there's a Sea Bears game here tomorrow, so we're set up across the street in the corporate offices in one of the boardrooms there. It's a little bit different setup, but again, like anything, you find out that these scouts adapt and they just get it done.
Last one from me, but forward, defenseman, best player available. Like,
Yes.
Right. All of the above.
Well, again, it's there seems to be lots of forwards in that people are talking about. There's obviously some good defensemen. You don't know where they're going to fall to you yet. I think every scout probably has their own wish and hope list. And that's kind of what you're going through here right now to talk about. So if you spend a lot of time and you hear the comments, so where do you have them? Well, I got them side by side on my list. So well, what does that mean? Like, how side by side? Are they this side by side or are they this side by side? So those are the conversations you're getting into, the more granular here now, and that's where. That's where it becomes, interesting, intriguing, kind of tense sometimes. Those are the conversations.
Morning.
Morning.
How do you plan to, when you're talking about the virtual draft, now how do you plan to, kind of get back into, the instantaneous communication that you do on the floor, that you can't do this now? There's going to be a bit of a time lag on things.
So the league is going to set up some virtual rooms where the player, goes into, and we'll get on a virtual call with them, right away and have that. We will, every team will have a representative there. Jimmy Roy will be there for us as player development. So he'll, get the first touch point with, with the actual player, and obviously start the process of getting him into the development side of of the organization. Then obviously they'll be getting on a plane and coming to development camp, which starts shortly thereafter. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure given the history of the league with the events that they try to that they have been very successful at pulling off, Steve Merrill will have some good ideas that will go into implementation and see how they look on TV.
I got one more. You were talking about the advantage, you being virtual now, you don't have to rush back for free agency. So is there any other advantages that you possibly can see, that something you could take away from this?
Well, yeah, again, the freedom to talk openly in the room, that was something that we noted in the past. COVID drafts is the ability to, if you want to ask the scout that's sitting across the room, you don't have to walk around and ask him a question. You can just say it out loud and stuff like that. So, you will get I guess a lot more dialogue, when it comes to that. But again, there's the feel of being shoulder to shoulder and kind of seeing where the picks go. There's that level of excitement that we'll see if it's still there.
I've heard from a couple of scouts, their take on this draft is there's a bit of a drop off at some point, and then from that point on, right until well into the second round, they don't see that big of a difference between some of the picks that are in the teens and some of the picks that are in the 30s. I don't know if you see it that way, but if your organization does see it that way, does that create more opportunity to the guy that you see in there that you really like to move around and go get that guy?
So I think in some ways you're correct. There's always drop-offs at different points in time, and that's what I said. I think we're seeing a lot of the same names. When it comes to public lists and different things like that, you're just seeing them in a different order. And I think that's where you spend the time in yours to make your order. And again, it's not that you dislike a player, but the scouts get paid to put a list together, and it's not, sometimes it's hard to say, well, I want to go shop for this, so put my list in that order, or I want to, they say, well, but the gap between this guy and this guy we perceive is, far enough apart that we still should take this guy, even though, I want to put a list together of these kind of guys. So and that's what they do, So and that's why everybody's list is different, and again, I think, and it depends where that break is. Like, it depends if that break in is early in the draft or later, like earlier in the first round, later in the first round. That's when the scatter shot starts to kind of to happen. So and I think that's where the uniqueness of the draft. Sometimes it starts after 1. Sometimes it starts after 5. Sometimes after 10. And then that's the interesting part.
You get that scenario where you've got like a wide swath of guys that there may not be that much of a differentiation from. What are the things, without giving away like trade secrets or anything like that, but like last year, it was supposed to be kind of like that with that draft, and you go and you get afterwards, and you get Walton, you get these players that really popped after you got them. So what can you share with us about some of the things that when you get into that, all of the guys who are kind of in the same shoulder,
Right.
that have popped for you guys that make those guys stand out?
Well, so a lot of it comes down to projection, and I guess where the scouts, are projecting, and like sometimes one scout may watch a player play and think that their hockey sense is just adequate, and some may watch them and say your hockey sense is off the charts. Like, again, that's a varying degree. Probably one of the things that get looked at and get measured and get reported on is hockey sense. But it's, I can ask probably each and every one of you in the room, what's your definition of hockey sense? And you're going to have a different opinion. So that's why, when you have staffs and you kind of develop your criteria, you develop what you value in players, what you value in each criteria, like skating. There's 200-foot skating, and then there's quickness. A player may not be a good 200-foot player, but he could be really quick in the in the holes, and vice versa. Just different things like that. And then size does get factored into it. You don't want to overestimate something or another, but there are different factors that maybe if it is a smaller player, where do they rise in some of the other areas, or vice versa. One of the things that I hate to hear in the scouting meetings when you're talking about big players, well, he skates well for his size. No. Don't say that. It's like, don't want to see that. So, again, so it's over time. You talk about these things and develop them over time. And again, that's the thing. There's so many stories where whether you take a player and then literally the team next to you looks at you saying, that was my guy next. Like, there's lots of that does go on as well. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a few times where you swear under your breath, but quite openly, because you're sitting there and you see a guy on your list and you know how passionate your head guy is for it. And either you don't have a pick, or so it gets picked right before you, or something like that.
Kevin, just from looking ahead to the development camp, I mean, how much excitement from an organizational perspective is there to see these guys all together? I mean, obviously you go and watch them during the year, or Jimmy does, but to get them together, see, Jacob Julian winning a Memorial Cup, growing Colby Barlow, that sort of thing, to have them all in one spot to.
Yeah, so if I regret one thing, over the course of the tenure here, it would be not having a development camp, right out of COVID there, and when we didn't have that, because I think we missed that opportunity to do exactly what you just said there, get everybody together. That's their chance to wear the sweater, to have coaching involved, talk about it, but. Like, for me, the real value is in the off-ice side of it, like the training, being able to, start putting into these players' heads how important, what they do off the ice, what they put into their body is, how they train, get measurements on them so that you can say, well, here's an NHL player's measurement. Here's yours. I'm not saying it's bad, but you want to get there, you got to get there. So that's that's really I think the value that's in there. It's not an evaluation side of things on the ice, although it's nice, when you can get them out there and, you see them have some fun, because it is, it's summer hockey, and it's not even that, actually, it's just fun. So, but it's there's lots of things that, you can impart organizational philosophy, into the group.
Just in terms of health, obviously Nikita Chibrikov and Brad Lambert both dealing something at the end of the Moose season.
Yeah.
How are they progressing?
So I think Brad was probably ready to kind of start joining us if we were able to get past Dallas. I think you would have seen him in the in the skates. Arnie actually talked to Chibi. I think he said a couple days ago. I think he's on his way back to North America here for some follow-ups, and then I think he'll train the rest of the summer either in Toronto or in Florida. But he says he feels good, and those are the conversations that Arnie had, with those young guys, and he's going to talk to all of them, before training camp, certainly, hopefully before development camp here, and just kind of, tell them the eyes are on you. There's at some point in time there's going to be opportunity. It could come quicker. It could come, down the line. But as an organization, we need you to take these next steps. And everybody wants to play. All the young players want to play quick, fast now. We want them to play, when they're ready and for a long time.
Kevin, non-draft related, is there anything you can tell us that won't get you a fine or your knuckles wrapped from the National Hockey League on your big news of last week?
Yeah, so obviously, again, it's a unique situation, where you have a player that is a totally unrestricted free agent, and coming back to play. So the rules are a little bit different. It's just more on the contract filing side of things. There's, limitations that the league has as far as being able to file and register. So, but we've had some great conversations, with Jonathan. He's obviously very, very excited. I think Arnie and him talked last night. I was talking to Arnie this morning in the room. Again, he's on board with both feet, so to speak, and he was talking about the testing. He was talking about what are the standards, what are we trying to uphold here. So, but that's him. Like we. In our intel there, he was skating in Arizona State, and there was some people that have closeness to our scouting staff, that talked about, how hard he was working and how much, he had, kind of progressed. But the thing that they raved about, was just him, him as a person with all those young players, and just how every one of those young players raved about how good he made them feel like, and that's what he is. He's a leader, and again, when we started, when this started to become more real, I reached out to our captains and said, look, we're going to have a Zoom here with JT. Can I give him your numbers to call? And like within seconds, all the guys are texting back like absolutely, and Arnie had conversations. So again, it's when we do get a chance to get him here, I don't think he can make it here for July 1st. He's got some commitments, but shortly thereafter, you guys will get the sense of just how excited he is and how special that the opportunity to come back and play in the National Hockey League is for him.
And for purely context purposes, as I'm not saying this is why you signed or have made an agreement to sign Jonathan Toews, but certainly the reaction we got from the fan base that listens to our station feel that that might be somewhat of an incentive for Nikolaj Ehlers. I don't know whether it is or isn't, but are you still having dialogue with Nikolaj? Is that something you anticipate going to the 11th
so
hour?
we'll continue to have conversations until we can't, or until we're saying congratulations, thank you. Like those are things that again, but certainly I think for us, and again, I don't want to get too much into the contract, but we structured it on purpose to have flexibility, to be able to pivot and do different things, from a signing standpoint of other players as well, and that was enticing to JT as well. Like he readily understands what it means to have other players around you too. So hopefully it moves the needle. We'll find out.
And Kevin, just to wrap up, one on your captain. Obviously, we got the news release that he had the surgery. Can you just give us a little more detail? Like, was that something that came up post medicals in the medicals after? Or?
So this has probably come up a couple of times now, and he's been doing maintenance on it over the course of years, and after every season you kind of do a benchmark test to see where things are at, and this year after the test, we compare it against the last year's test, and there was noticeable change, and so his doctor's recommendation that it's going to happen. You don't want that to happen in the middle of the year. So we made the hard decision, but not a hard decision to get it done at the beginning. And I think he's got a checkup coming up here shortly. Arnie said he spoke to him a couple days ago there as well, and was I think almost off the crutches, I think, and stuff like that. So moving along.
Yeah, and the final part of that was going to be, it's a pretty broad timeline of how long he could be out. Could be a couple weeks into the season, could be a month and a half. I mean, you don't have any more clarity yet.
No, and we won't really until I think he progresses into the skating phases and stuff like that. Like those are things where you also want to be cautious, because it's you put all that time and effort into rehab. You want to make sure that it's the right decisions. Awesome, thanks a lot.